Welcome to the Slut Next Door podcast, where we dive deep into desire, unravel kinks and fetishes, and explore the deliciously naughty side of self-discovery. I'm Beatrix Vale, an erotic audio creator, and your guide to all things kinky and curious. So let's begin. What if I told you that the biggest threat to your access to adult content right now isn't censorship, but legislation disguised as protection? Welcome back to the podcast, my curious, kinky minds. Now, today we're stepping outside the bedroom for a moment to talk about something that's directly affecting both creators and consumers of adult content: the wave of age verification laws being pushed through the United States. And if you're someone who enjoys erotic content online, or if, like me, you're a creator who's passionate about consent, privacy, and free expression, this episode is going to matter to you. As a member of the Free Speech Coalition, I've been closely following these developments. And while the stated goal of these laws is to protect minors, the reality is that many of them are overreaching, ineffective, and downright dangerous to adult privacy and digital rights. And as you'll hear today, these laws aren't just harming the adult industry, they're threatening the broader principles of free speech and bodily autonomy. So, we're going to break down what these laws actually do, why they don't work, who they really hurt, and what we can do about it. And of course, I'll be sharing my personal take as a hypno-dom who values connection, consent, and the freedom to create and consume erotic content safely and ethically. Now, before we dive in, make sure that you're subscribed to this podcast. I promise there will not be quote unquote political episodes like this. I just felt this was very important to bring to light and to talk about. But make sure you're subscribed, leave a comment or rating if you're enjoying the podcast. And also, you can check out my website, missbeatrix.com, to explore more of my erotic audio worlds and community. Now, let's dive into these so-called porn laws and everything behind it. I'm going to first talk about where I stand and where the Free Speech Coalition stands on all of this. So, if you don't know, the Free Speech Coalition, or shortened FSC, is the National Trade Association for the adult industry. They advocate for our rights as creators, performers, and also platforms, especially when it comes to issues like censorship, privacy, and discrimination. And they've been very vocal about how these new age verification laws are not only ineffective, but unconstitutional. So, from the FSC's perspective, and mine, these laws do not meaningfully protect minors. Instead, they open the door to mass surveillance, data breaches, and First Amendment violations. We're talking about mandatory ID uploads just to access legal adult content. Just think about that. Your government issued ID, stored, verified, potentially tracked, just to view porn. Now, as a creator, I have to upload my ID, and that makes sense. I have to be tracked by the government for taxes. I have to prove my age as a performer. That's safe. But for you viewing the content, I don't like it. And it's not hard to see how dangerous that becomes, especially for people in conservative states, queer communities, or anyone exploring kink or sexuality privately. This isn't about safety. This is about control. And FSC has been challenging these laws in court, including a major case, Free Speech Coalition versus Paxton, which takes aim at Texas's age verification law for being unconstitutional under the First Amendment. And one of the biggest issues FSC raises is that these laws create a very chilling effect. People stop accessing legal content because they don't want to risk their privacy. And creators like me see a drop in traffic, income, and safety. Platforms either pull out of entire states or restrict access entirely, making the internet smaller, less free, and less safe for everyone. And there are better solutions, like using device level parental controls, digital literacy, and comprehensive sex education. But lawmakers are not interested in those. They're interested in easy headlines and moral outrage. So this hits very close to home for me because while the adult industry is often excluded from conversations about rights and justice, what's happening right now is absolutely a free speech issue. It's an issue of consent, of bodily autonomy, and of digital freedom. So, to really understand what's wrong with these laws even deeper, we have to look at the First Amendment. So, the right to access legal adult content is part of our freedom of speech. And that's just not my opinion or someone else's, that's legal precedent. Back in 1997, the Supreme Court ruled in Reno versus ACLU that mandatory age verification for online content was unconstitutional. And why? It's because it wasn't narrowly tailored. It placed too many burdens on adults who were simply trying to access legal material. So the courts decided that these laws chilled free expression and failed to offer less intrusive alternatives, things like parental controls or education. And that decision still matters today. It set a standard. If a law restricts speech, it must pass strict scrutiny and it must serve a compelling interest and use the least restrictive means possible. And these new laws, they don't pass that test. Mandating government issued ID for every adult viewer is not the least restrictive means. It's invasive, it's dangerous, and it creates a digital surveillance state that punishes people for exploring their sexuality online. And if we're being honest, most of these bills aren't written with nuanced legal understanding. They're driven by political pressure and moral panic. But the Constitution does not bend for fear or outrage. It's built to protect our rights, especially when those rights are unpopular. And that's why the Free Speech Coalition is fighting these laws in court, not just for the industry, but for you, the listener, for anyone who believes that sexual freedom, privacy, and speech still matter. The truth is, these laws are not protecting minors, they're punishing adults, and the fallout is already showing up in ways lawmakers didn't predict or simply didn't care about. So let's start with the most obvious: privacy. Forcing people to upload a government ID just to access legal adult content is a data breach just waiting to happen. These are highly sensitive databases, often managed by third party companies. that are not immune to hacks. And once that information is out there, your name, your face, your porn habits, it's out there for good. And then there's access to information. These laws don't just block porn, they block sexual health content, LGBTQ plus resources, kink education like this podcast, and more. Anything that gets swept into the vague category of, quote, sexual explicit material becomes collateral damage. And for people in marginalized communities, especially queer and trans folks, that's a terrifying loss of access. Now, let's talk about now the economic consequences. Major adult platforms have already pulled out of multiple states because of these laws. Pornhub, for example, has blocked access entirely in places like Utah, Mississippi, and Florida. So that means loss of revenue for performers, content creators, and tech workers in this industry, including people like me. I post audio files on Pornhub. So that means I'm losing traffic for free content out there. And so when that traffic disappears, so do earnings, and so does our reach. And it's not just the big companies that suffer. It's small creators, indie platforms, the fans who support us, and the entire ecosystem of adult entertainment that thrives on consent, creativity, and connection. And then there's the broader cultural effect, one that I care about deeply: shame. These laws send a message that if you enjoy adult content, you're doing something wrong, that your sexuality is something to be hidden, regulated, or punished. And that shame, it doesn't keep anyone safe. It drives people deeper underground. So let's be clear again. These laws don't just fail to protect young people, they harm everyone in the process. Protecting minors is a goal most of us can agree on, but that doesn't mean we need to break the internet or trample on the rights of adults to get there. The truth is, real solutions already exist. They're just not as flashy or politically convenient. I mean, first, there's parental control software. Every device, browser, streaming platform already comes with built in tools that allow caregivers to restrict access to adult content. And they're not perfect, but they're far more targeted than blanket surveillance laws. And they empower parents to make choices for their own households instead of turning that power over to the state. And then there's digital literacy and education. We don't keep kids safe by pretending sex doesn't exist. We do it by giving them the tools to understand their bodies, their boundaries, and the content they may come across online. So, comprehensive sex education works. It leads to better outcomes across the board, less shame, less risk, more communication. Knowledge is power. And then we can't forget platform level moderation. Many adult sites already use age gates, content filters, and tagging systems. But instead of partnering with these platforms to improve that infrastructure, lawmakers are just trying to ban them outright. And this is where the conversation needs to shift from control to consent, from fear to responsibility. We don't need more censorship. We just need better tools, better education, and better conversations. And frankly, I'm going to speak very honest, we need to stop using porn as a scapegoat for everything we're afraid to talk about, especially when it comes to parenting, technology, and sexuality. And so at the end of the day, this isn't just about porn laws. It's about power. It's about who gets to control what we see, how we express ourselves, and what we're allowed to feel desire for. And as someone who lives and works in this space, not just as a creator, but as a woman, as a dom, and as someone who's deeply invested in ethical erotic content, these laws don't just threaten my business, they threaten the trust, the exploration, the connection that makes what I do so powerful and meaningful for people who listen. I receive messages from fans who tell me my work helped them understand their desires, release shame, feel safe exploring who they are, and that is real impact. That's why I care about this fight. Because when lawmakers attack adult content under the guise of protection, they're not just hurting the industry, they're hurting real people, maybe people like you. And trust me, it's very important that we can want to keep kids safe. I do too. Um, and believe in personal privacy. We can advocate for healthy boundaries without criminalizing pleasure. And we can hold space for sexuality without surrendering our rights to political theater. So, if this conversation resonates with you, if you're someone who values erotic content, personal freedom, or the creators who show up online with honesty and intention, I want to suggest 3 things that you can do. First, you can visit freespeechcoalition.com to learn more about the legal fights underway and how you can support them. 2, you can share this episode with someone who needs to hear it or someone who might not realize how close we are to losing access to things that connect us. And thirdly, you can join me, visit MissBeatrix.com to stay in touch with my work, my podcast, and the kinky little world that we're still building together. So thank you for listening. Thank you for caring. And thank you for being part of a world where pleasure, expression, and freedom still matter. And I'm sorry that this episode isn't my usual sexiness, but I've been wanting to speak on this topic because maybe you didn't know, maybe you were unaware, confused about this fight. So until next time, be safe, be curious, and never stop questioning what power really looks like. And that's a wrap for this episode of The Slut Next Door, where we dive deep into the raw, unapologetic truths of human desire. If you loved what you heard today, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a juicy moment. Want to connect with me outside the podcast? Click the link in my bio where you can find lots of juicy content and options. Until next time, I'm Beatrix Vale, your Slut Next Door, and I'll see you in the next episode.